what, as a business leader, should you think to use at a time like now? I will start with you, Anand.
Okay, sure.
Please,
Okay, so
what do you think that the tools are, the
the
right
tools.
ones?
So I think there's two elements to this. So just stepping back from the tools just for a second, there's the principles and the mindsets. And I think the key thing for a leader at this time is to calm and reassure employees. And that really means being clear about how this crisis and this situation has affected the company and also the ways of working. In terms of, specifically in terms of tools, I think what I've noticed is increasing feedback loops. So obviously when we were in the office, there was feedback was much more available and accessible. And all of a sudden, finding ourselves at home, iterating, creating feedback loops. So for example, in a couple of the groups I'm involved in, we have a scrum meeting every morning, so 10, 15 minutes. What are we going to do for the day? We have a check-in at the end of the day or the following morning. We have a 1-week window and a 2-week window. And what that does is it handles the kind of uncertainty of not knowing on a normal project timeline whether, if something is like 2 or 3 months down the line. And what this seems to do is it reassures people in what they're doing that day, that week, and in the shorter term. So I think that's one of the key things people can implement straight away to reduce overwhelm and uncertainty.
I like that. Ayana, I want to turn to you on this question with your being a fellow communication expert and probably looking into, often crises are external looking, but now it's been both, right? It's been an external crisis, an internal one. Do you, from your perspective, is there a tool that you think always works in a large company like yours, sort of calm people down?
So I would agree with what's been said already, what I would add to that is there's a bit about being really transparent. And so there's that constant feedback loop, and in doing so, being really open in the communications and transparent with people about what you know, what you don't know, when you'll tell them more, how you'll tell them more. And I think it's really important that our leaders are transparent, particularly in a crisis in a time like now, and they're very genuine in how they are communicating about what's going on, either internally or externally, or how it's impacting the company. And I would talk about our CEO, for example, has done an amazing job of keeping the entire company updated. We had never, I think, even talked about doing Teams live events, and now they're almost weekly. And other members of our leadership team are invited in to talk, and we open it up for questions. And it's literally, people can ask questions, and the questions are answered based on most liked. So if there is a burning question out there, everybody can see it. People can sort of rank them, and they get answered first. And so there's a bit, and so it's a very transparent process. And so employees know that their burning questions are getting answered. And I can tell you, it's been absolutely amazing. And then much of that is then put externally on social media, so then the world can see it too. So I'd say there's something to that, and it has really taken on and taken off, and employees are actually yearning and asking for even more, and they've responded really well to it.
The whole idea of transparency, yeah, I really like that, and I think it also comes back to our global leaders. Being based in New York, we've had a daily press briefing by the governor of New York, by Andrew Cuomo, and this has been phenomenal. And it's, it reminds me of what your CEO has been doing. It's just, this is an unusual times. This is what's going on. This is what the figures look like. This is where we're doing good. This is what we're doing, and just making sure that everybody is empowered and knows what the situation is. Shona.
Yeah, I agree with everyone so far. I know that both with my company and with Women in Energy, we've done different things just to adapt. I'd never been on a Zoom meeting before this, and now I feel like I'm an expert. So you really do need to adapt. And I mean, technology right now is our best friend. And just change the platform, you know, rather than having your weekly sales meeting in the board meeting, let's do it over Zoom or conference call, whatever's easiest, just to get people together so that there is constant communication. I know that I have a colleague, and she's had a coworker that struggled with mental health during this. You know, he lived by the Canadian guidelines, like do not leave your house, social distance. And so, you know, mental health was a big struggle for him. And so I think reaching out to team members and really getting engaged is really key. I know with Women in Energy, we normally, like, I take care of our monthly technical sessions, and we do those in person, which is really great. You know, it's great for networking and everything. But we changed over to Zoom, and at the first session during quarantine, we changed and we had the board talk about, you know, everyone's experience so far. We were a month in. We had, you know, one board member, she's working at home but has young children, so she's having to teach them from home because schools are closed. Another board member was laid off, so she talked about being laid off and trying to find new employment. We had another board member that's a single lady, and she said that she doesn't even have a dog or cat to talk to, so she's been talking to her plants. So we really just showed how to adapt and work through these times. I think for me as well, you know, there's some things as a leader that you need to do, like choosing candor over charisma, you know, be honest and just very transparent with everything, how things are looking.
You know, if we think about how things were 5-10 years ago, and you would hear these stories about offices, Google offices allowing people to take naps or having a ping pong table, and you were like, wow, you know, this is the future. And it was very, very unconventional. But I feel now, and that's a question I want to ask. And do you think that the unconventional leadership has led to more performing teams? And do you think that unconventional leadership is now the new conventional? Is this the direction we need to go into? Anand, what's your take?
So I just saw a post earlier today that said that Twitter has announced that its employees can now forever choose whether they come into the office or work from home. And I think we've seen some of these shifts happen over time as our society has changed. I worked in a company that was a holacracy. It was a non-hierarchical, self-managing, you know, it's a new system of organization of company where the distribution of autonomy and decision-making is being pushed further and further out. And so when people work from home, there's a certain level of self-discipline and self-leadership that's needed in order to manage our time, manage the other challenges that we have. So I think things that started off a few years ago as unconventional are becoming more normal.
Eric, what do you think of the whole unconventional being the new conventional way of dealing with work?
Well, I think it's, I think what I've noticed is that the new way of being a lot more giving out, and I've seen many companies and business leaders are really sharing business processes and techniques, like they're doing free webinars and they're doing free strategy sessions. And I think before they were having these as almost like intellectual property or keeping them tight, but now there's more like an openness and willingness to share. And I've seen a lot of that the last few months. They really, really want to share and give out this extraness and givingness, which I've seen a lot of. And also, one thing I like to say, like what I'm really proud of the company I'm in now is how the leaders in the company went to the government and said, you know what, we really need to work together here. You need to give us better working conditions so that we can kick off more projects. So actually the government gave them for the next 2 years really favorable tax situations. And because of that, they are now starting projects that previously would not be lucrative because they were not financially viable, but now they are. So that the government is coming on board as well because of this crisis is really good, actually.
Right. It's showing more collaboration and making sure that working in a different ways all together can create something.
Yeah, like a unity thing. There's a massive growth of unity around the world. Yeah.
Right. Rita.
It's a very good question, and it's also about what is unconventional. It's easy to maybe bring it up as we're maybe doing things in a new way. I would probably say that something that is not new, it's old, but it has resurfaced as very important through some of the conversations I've had with CEOs, is the importance to dive into the purpose of the mission and the values of their organizations. That now they are starting to understand that that might be the very foundation of how we are working. So if we have these core values, we have this foundation, that is what matters in this organization. We are evolving around it. So where we are working doesn't really matter, but can we show up in our core value and deliver to our stakeholders, look after our people through focusing on the core values or the mission of this organization. So I've seen that there is a shift from it's all about the bottom line thinking, it's all about the finances, it's all about paying back to the shareholders and all these things, to suddenly say, it's time to go back to the very fundament of our organization. What are we founded on? And see how we can unite each other around that. So what I hear in that when they're sharing with me is that they're using conversation with their teams and these thousands of people to install a very clear connection to the core values within their organization. And that creates a feeling of belonging and inclusion in organizations. So not that it's unconventional because it's been there all the time, but I would say what has happened before is that these statements are nice slogans, and now suddenly they've been brought back and say, you know what, it's time for us to have a look at them and actually see the value of these.
Right, so less distraction, coming back to our core. Okay, thank you. Reina, what defines unconventional leadership for you, and what's your take on the whole thing?
Yeah, I loved the words agility and adaptable. I think, being the president of Calgary Women in Energy and trying to lead our group through this time, we definitely had to be agile and adaptable. And it was important for us to bring a sense of community to the group and support. And I also think when I think of like bigger companies and CEOs, a challenge with being unconventional, because so in Calgary, Alberta, we have tons of big corporations, and with working from home, I think the challenge for a leader is to also challenge their own, ideas of what a typical office setting looks like. So you really have to, all the traditional way of doing work and the traditional way of leading in a corporate office setting has kind of been dismantled. So as an unconventional way of looking at it, I think you have to overcome some of those traditional barriers that you are so used to doing, and really creating that change so that everyone still feels connected and everyone is still working towards those core values and common goals of the organization.
What are the key takeaways from this very strange period?
Well, thank you. I think we might have briefly touched about this, but the key thing is the people are sharing a lot information, sharing processes and business secrets, strategies. There's a massive sharing thing going on around social media, webinars. That's been really, really good. I've also seen a very positive side where the government and business are working together, because we are all in this together, so that the governments are giving better working arrangements, and also because of this COVID, they are giving very special grants and loans to go to businesses, which the businesses have to or should be using. But I think maybe one of the biggest one is the thing with values, and people are stopping up and really evaluating what is the core values for me and my family. Suddenly being home with the families and actually feeling the missing of the loved ones, they kind of start questioning a lot of things. So that's another big one. And I think also you've seen a lot of communities have grown a lot stronger. Like you see people coming together and they say, we can cook food for the elderly, we'll go and deliver it. Or I know this cleaning company said that we're going to go and clean for all nurses and doctors who have to work in hospitals. So there's a massive unity coming together thing, which I've seen, which is a massive strength. And I think it has always been there, but now because of what happened, it suddenly comes to the surface. And I think especially the younger ones, or the people who are looking maybe for job careers, they will look for these companies and see who are the ones who really been playing an active role and helping in this situation going on now. These are the companies we want to be working with and be part of.
Thank you. I'll turn to Raina. What do you think in terms of, this 2020 is it a defining year at all for you, or do you think we'll go back to the old habits? What are the key takeaways?
Yeah, I hope we don't go back to the old habits. I think that this is a defining year, and I think that, on a global scale, people are looking at, a bunch of things. And I think if I can bring it back to, women in leadership and, what Sean and I presented on, people are going to be looking at corporations or companies that are operating at a higher, ethical standard when it comes to environmental and social and governance, and how they are interacting within their communities and what they're giving back to the communities. I think that's a really important takeaway from all of this. And I think that when I look at women leaderships, women represent half of the population. So investors are going to start looking at companies that have, their executive makeup with women in mind, because they represent half of the population. So they're representing those customers and those communities and those stakeholders that these organizations and corporations are operating in. And it was mentioned before, the younger generation too, they're going to look at companies who have these higher ethical standards. So I think that there will be a shift, and I hope that things they don't go to back to normal, but we're creating something new that's going to be sustainable for a longer term.
Rita, what do you think of the shift? Will there be any shift?
I think one of the greatest shifts that we have seen is who we think sits with the answer isn't necessarily where the answer sits, the new idea sits. We have seen a world that's really changed. We've seen the young people show up with great contributions to find solutions of anything from a different source of antibac to getting food out to people. I mean, we have a completely different setup on who has visions and ideas that the world really needs. I would say, for me, working in particular with getting women's visions heard around the leadership table, for me, I see finally a light in the end of the tunnel. I think this might be the shift that we needed, that we're not longer talking about like 80 years in Norway to reach equality and 200 years in the US to reach equality. Because in order to really create equality, it's about getting women's visions to be heard around the leadership table and acted upon. The challenge women have had up till this point is that they're trying to fit into a different shape than they really are. Like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole or whatever. And they've always have to conform. They've always had to become the round. So they have not really been included in the way that we truly want. So I'm taking this up to on a very high level outside organizations. The thing is that what the situation has proven to us is that a shift can come in 24 hours. We have to adapt to situations in 24 hours. Organizations that have been for years struggle to get, use Teams or Zoom, or no, we can't do that. And my goodness, you can't work from home, you must be nuts. We have seen shifts, like in Equinor, where I remember the CIO moved from making decisions in the boardroom to the laundry room.
Well, do you think some companies will cease to exist? Do you think, the leaders who don't adapt to these new ways might just disappear? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone has had to adapt, and I think if you're not, then you're getting stuck in the past. I think for me personally, I see so many people with meaningless travel, going to the UK from Canada or going to Houston for one meeting and flying back. And I mean, not only is that cutting into your work-life balance, I know personally, after a week of traveling, I'm exhausted. I need to watch Netflix for a couple hours and recoup. So I think that'll overall reduce expenses and just help improve people's work-life balance. Having a quick Zoom meeting rather than flying just somewhere for an hour meeting. We've even done a couple virtual happy hours with clients, so we've really adapted. But I mean, I can definitely say I'm excited to get out there and shake hands and hug people again.
Eric.
Short term, I think leaders invite everybody in the company to a massive brainstorming, only allowed to focus on positive thing. There's only positive available. What's the positive now? What's the solution? And brainstorm and come up with good ideas and implement the easier one. Long term, I think we all have a trust and respect for Steve Jobs and what he stood for. And I'm not sure if you know, but at Steve Jobs' funeral, he gave all his friends and all the close family and friends who came to his funeral, he gave them a book from Yogananda, The Autobiography of a Yogi. So I think people should think about that and incorporate some of these values into their organization. That'd be yoga, meditation. But how come a guy like him leave the last word he says to his people is that kind of book, The Autobiography of a Yogi? I think that says it a lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Ayana, what's your advice for leaders?
For leaders, I agree with Anand and Reina. Listening is key during this period. Over communicate. So as a communicator, I'm gonna definitely recommend not just communicating and engaging, but over communicating and engaging during this period, and then support your people as a leader. So for example, we have offered as a company the Headspace app to all of our employees at no cost, and then extended that to partners as well. So because we know right now there's lots of anxiety, people are worried, people, with the changes, in many instances, people are stressed, and all of that wears on your mental health. So that's just one example. There are many others, but I would say the three are listening, over communicate, and support your people.
And Rita?
I would say short-term, long-term, create a space where people feel that they really, truly belong. And therefore they will speak up, they will share their great ideas with their tribes. And that's what we need.
We're all in this together. We will come out of it all together.